G'day. Aisha Mahari here, live and all like that there. Yeah, topic, borderline splitting. It's at the core of relational impossibility, or relationship impossibility too. Some unfortunate, no, I don't know if this is working. Okay. Somebody let me know if you can hear me, cause some unfortunate. Oh, I see, okay. I thought I had a sound issue, that's fine. Sorry I always start off like this. So, I think a lot of you already know that it's the splitting in people with BPD. You might think it's many other things, but that's at the core, really, of making relationships with them impossible. Or relationships with people with untreated BPD cannot possibly be healthy because of this splitting. And what's that all about? Because, like when you're on the other side of it, it can be confusing. Oh, thank you for that, Heather. And Gino. It can be confusing. And then people come to be really aware of what it's all about. But why do people with codependency still deny it? So I'm just going to talk a little bit about borderline splitting, because you never know when somebody's going to be like brand new searching what's going on in their life in a relationship. So, is or has borderline splitting destroyed your relationship? Or is it sabotaging your relationship? Or making it so next to impossible right now? Because, borderline splitting does ruin relationships. Because people with, especially untreated BPD, not all people with BPD are like, some are in recovery, some have healed. Yes, people can heal and recover from BPD. And they can unlearn the defense of splitting. However, for most people watching my channel, you're not with somebody with BPD, or you weren't with somebody with BPD who's getting significant treatment or beyond, if any, at all. So people with BPD can misconstrue the behaviors of others when their feelings are brought up in the relationship. And this is a key thing, because people with BPD have often high intelligence, IQ. They have very low emotional intelligence, or EQ. And what happens is, when they get into interpersonal relationships, especially significant other, but in all types of relationships, to a point, there's going to be splitting. But in significant other relationships, it's exponentially usually worse. So the person with BPD is unaware of how they feel when their feelings surface, and feelings surface largely from inside in a triggered way that can be triggered and dissociative, at times leading to age regression within, or maybe demonstrated without, but not always. So when people with BPD have all these feelings, they get triggered, and you don't trigger them, but they get triggered by just averagely you trying to relate, you trying to be kind, you trying to quote, you trying to love them, and they can't take that love in, and they don't have any trust. So I know I've said this a million times, but with the arrested emotional development, they don't have a self, they don't have a container of self from which to relate to self or others. And that is seriously one of the most important things to know about borderline personality. But people with BPD, like I said, can change it. And BPD is not a brain disease, by the way. It's not in the neurobiology. Leading pioneers in the field, and there's all kinds of information on this, and I'm going to have more coming in ajmahar.co. So anyway, people with BPD do not realize that their feelings belong within them. That goes right back to the beginning of infancy to toddlerhood. What leads to the emotional arrested development is that the feelings that people with BPD have, from attachment difficulties, from fear of abandonment, from abandonment perceived or actual in childhood and or more, they have to, this split occurs really early in life within the person with BPD first, or between mother and the infant. And then it's a defense mechanism for survival. So, um, like I said, you're not responsible. They don't have a way of internalizing their feelings. So when people with BPD go to therapy, take the long-term route of significant treatment, etc., they can learn how to find the self, build the self, and how to have an internalized container of self from which to relate way differently. But for those who aren't going to seek treatment, that's not going to happen. And so in their emotional reality, which doesn't mean they're intellectually out of touch with objective reality, but the emotions are driving everything, and they are maladaptive defense mechanisms for survival. So they don't realize that their feelings belong within them. So they can't handle it, they can't hold it, they don't know what it is, and I'm not making an excuse for it. So yeah, who's ever closest is going to get all of the feelings that the person with BPD is feeling, that they don't know what it is, they don't know why they're feeling it. They're just going to ascribe it to the last thing you said, did, or didn't say, or didn't do, or happened or didn't happen. And that really has nothing to do with you as a person who's with somebody with BPD or was. And this goes for all relationship types, by the way. So people with BPD, like that, like I said, the splitting is such a defense mechanism that it prevents people with BPD from seeing both the good and bad aspects of a partner at any given time. It's impossible. They cannot see paradox. They cannot hold the two contrasting, say something really positive about you and something just maybe not as positive about you at times. They cannot hold the two at once at all. So in the beginning, yes, it all goes in a way that isn't really real, but that's not done purposefully by people with BPD. That is not love bombing. That is mirroring, idealization, and the borderlines codependent people pleasing, because they want to merge with you, as I've said many times, because they need to seek identity through you. And so when a person gets triggered to devaluation, they're triggered inside already emotionally, and it doesn't have anything to do with you. And then they have to externalize that out because it's unbearable for them. And so when they're in relationships, most people, especially with untreated BPD, are usually always in a state of at least low anxiety, to higher to maybe unmanageable anxiety and or depression and or a lot of other things that are part of the mood swings and the fact that people with BPD untreated don't really know why they're doing what they're doing or why they're feeling what they're feeling. And then they do not realize, often do not have awareness of the impact of their moods and or behavior and or words upon you. And some might realize that after, but they can't realize it during. And then when they realize it after, they want to try harder, try to do better. But when the emotional triggers happen again inside of them, when that emotion builds again inside of them and they don't have anywhere to put it and they don't know what's happening with it, it gets externalized, and this is the cycle. The same cycle happens over and over again. So splitting was absolutely necessary, or it happens in childhood because it is about survival of maybe a young infant in a biological sense. In extreme situations, people with BPD, their feelings, well, they can be very much internalized as well, but they're going to be externalized. And in the way that they can perceive that others see them, or the way that they see or rather don't see themselves. So it again is the repetition compulsion of what's happened with parents or a parent, and it just keeps replaying and replaying and replaying. And the person with BPD does not have conscious awareness unless until they get significant treatment. So people with BPD usually see the partner or a sibling or a parent or whomever in the best possible light, well, more to be a partner in a honeymoon phase stage of a relationship, but once their partner does something that brings up feelings, so like that's an interrelational aspect, like I'm relating to my partner and I might feel something. Okay, but I'm okay with that, and that's okay. It doesn't mean I feel something negative. But see, even when you're loving, and especially when you're loving and being kind and caring to this person with untreated BPD, they have no reference point for that. Oh, I think I'm back. I'm not really 100% sure. Oh, that was weird. Um, Trying to come back into the same stream that got crunched before, so I don't know if it carries on or starts over. This is different. Okay. So I don't even see it on my channel here. Just a second. If anybody's here, maybe you could let me know if you're hearing me. That was really weird. I don't know what happened. Something happened on my end too, but YouTube's been having its own struggles. I don't see me live on my own channel, which is crazy. Okay, let me search one other thing. Oh, technology, it's so much fun. Not. Okay, I can check this and see if I can find it. It's not showing. So I'm talking away here. What's going on? Because it's not showing as. Oh, okay. Well, there's a reason. That's crazy. Oh, this thing is just always trying to defeat me, I swear. It does a good job, too. Like, die. So if okay, I'm just going to keep yakking because I don't know if it's becoming part of the stream or not. But I see the problem, I think. Okay, well, that would be important, yes. Okay. So, let's see what's going on now. I still don't have a clue. Um, is this happening? I don't know. Maybe I just need to start totally over because I can't find it. I don't think it's on my channel. This is very different for sure. So it seems like, oh wait a minute, maybe I am live. Isn't this crazy? Um, so I don't know. Am I here now? Hello, is this thing on? So it seems like. There we go. So it seems like I am back. So right now it's just the OBS studio giving me messages. Hopefully not everything else will crash. I've never come back into the same stream that got interrupted by anyway. So I see a question here from Alpha Dog Elite 3. How do we stop splitting? So are you asking how do you stop somebody with BPD from splitting? Is that what the question is? I don't know what to do now because if I start all over again, it might be still part of the stream. This is fun, isn't it? Hi Roller Girl. So I guess I'm being heard and I guess I'm live right now. And I wanted to make some more points about BPD splitting, and actually I'm asking Alpha Dog Elite 3 what he said before, and he might not even be here anymore. So does anybody else who might be here right now have the question, how do you stop splitting? Because is that a question that likely means how do you stop the person with BPD from splitting? Oh, let me see. Yeah, lots of highs there. Hi, 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 and all that, right? Okay, so, where was I? Because I don't know what to do here. I'm either going to repeat everything over again, or, holy cow, I think I misplaced, I just had a couple of notes, but I mean, I could talk about this without notes. Um, you ever have one of those days where it's like everything is just ever since I started the stream, it's like, I don't know, this was here a minute ago, that's gone now, I can't find this, that isn't working. Anyway, this isn't the purpose of the stream. But hey, As a person who recovered fully from BPD, I can tell you right now with all this difficulty, I am definitely not splitting. How about that? Okay? I'm just trying to figure something else out here. And actually, I'm looking in all the wrong places. And maybe I will find what I'm looking for. And maybe I won't. Okay. That's interesting. In the middle of a. Okay. I can't find what I need to find. So, not helpful. Anyways, people with BPD, like I was saying, I don't know if this is going to be part of the stream or not. People with BPD do um, split because it is an infantile defense mechanism. Whoops, there goes that, but hopefully I don't need that. It is an infantile, oh, there it is, defensive thing that they don't really have any control over. And so, unless and until treatment, people can learn a lot in healing and recovery. So, let's see here. Yeah. Well, let's go on the assumption, but then see, I don't know who's here, who was here, or people are going to find me again. I'll kind of start from the top, I guess. Well, let me just go into where I was going to go next. So signs that BPD splitting, the defense of BPD splitting. Oh my God, sorry. The defense mechanism of BPD splitting, signs that it is sabotaging your relationship if in fact it hasn't already ended it. But a lot of people are in that ghosted place, or that on off again place, or that place of the borderline said to you, but I just need to take a break, which often is ghosting, sometimes isn't permanent, who knows? So people with BPD essentially use splitting, not consciously though, when their feelings are so overwhelming that the person reacts to get rid of them. Like they just from young childhood have learned how to, from infancy to toddlerhood, have learned, yeah, hi Alpha Dog 3. I am back. Glad you're back. So they, from a very young age, split out of a biological infant, like as an infant need to put outside of self what's being mirrored to them in attachment difficulties and the abandonment, the core wound of abandonment that's happening, which is often actual, but sometimes perceived, which is down to about 13% in perception now. So they don't have a form self to be able to internalize or have reference for their own feelings. So this is really the depth of what BPD is, and I like to look at it in a humanistic context, even though I'm not a BPD apologist. So borderline splitting destroys relationships because of the way that in the split to devaluation, they just often nonstop accusing the partner or you, if you've been a partner, of things because of how they feel. Because, without examining the evidence, but they get so overwhelmed by the feelings, it's just an explanation, not a justification. They get so overwhelmed by the feelings that they don't have the emotional intelligence or awareness anyways, but they can't think. They're only just going on feelings, and that's going to be repetition compulsion. So in other words, dissociatively in the here and now, experiencing the past again and again and again with no reference for why it hurts so much, why it's so anxiety producing, why it is so terror filled. And so they're going to throw all that out at you because in young childhood, infancy to toddlerhood, when splitting begins as a defense, there's no self there at that point for or by the age of 2 for the person who goes on to be diagnosed with BPD to be able to have any sense of that these feelings are internal or coming from within. So one thing I can say about that is when I had BPD, um, I was aware. I learned in therapy, and it was life changing. It's not just something you learn and then you manage. No, not forever. But in the time of recovery, what was I going to say about that? yeah, I started to realize, I realized my feelings, which I thought were a black cloud outside of myself trying to get me, were actually mine, like belonged inside of me. And that was a big time in the recovery process, because people with BPD don't know that if they're untreated. So that's why, just the explanation, why they're going to blame you for everything and accuse you of stuff, because they need to externalize what they're emotionally dysregulated and triggered by inside that's repeating from the past in often a very primal, subconscious to unconscious way. Oh, I didn't know that you also experienced splitting up a dog. Okay, well, I think the answer to how to stop it, it's really therapy. Because I don't think anybody can really stop it on their own. But then it depends what causes that for you if it isn't BPD. Um, and yeah, if you have any questions or comments, please share. And I'm just going to try to finish this part. And it does look like I'm still in the same live stream, so it's good I'm not repeating the beginning. Anyway, so people with BPD don't really have a way to examine the evidence. They don't have emotional, they don't have the awareness. It's not a lack of intellectual deficit. They don't have the emotional awareness to understand what's happening in those moments of dysregulated emotion, triggered dysregulated emotion, wherein they have no idea of the impact or what's happening to you because they don't know what's happening to them. But what's happening to them isn't because of others, it's from the past. So people with BP obviously can get so angry that they can totally lose a grip on themselves and their behavior without being aware of how they're treating other people. And same with the accusations and everything. And when people with BPD have all of this triggered dysregulated emotion that they don't have any reference for, like, why am I feeling all of it? They don't have any idea, nor do they have the coping skills untreated. So they just think that they're the victim of it all, that it's happening because it is happening to them again. And they were victimized in childhood more often than not. So it's happening to them again. But you have to remember at this point, they're in a dissociated place. Now, that is not an entire break with reality, but it definitely is an emotional one. And then they have no logic or reasoning skills going on in those moments. But it's not always about psychotic breaks or anything either. So it depends on severity. By the way, when I had BPD, I never had a psychotic break at all. So when I was experiencing, being triggered and splitting and dissociation and emotional dysregulation, none of those words really, were around back then. But I was aware. I was aware of, like, I was having this experience that I didn't get at all, and too many feelings, and I didn't know what to do with them. But I was aware of the day, the time, the building I was in, so you don't totally lose. People with BP, unless it's so severe that they do have psychotic breaks at times. I never did. So, but then I was atypical for BPD, as I've continued to say over the years. Never mind what I now know, doesn't matter anymore. But I definitely do not have BPD. But some people out there still like to say I do because I guess it floats their boat. So people with BPD, when they're splitting, they are blaming you so much, right? Accusing you of so many things that have not even been done, that it's so annihilating of relationships. And yet people with codependency tend to still be there to try to overgive. What's that about? That's what you have to ask yourself. If that is applies to you or did, and you're still trying to work that through. So some people with BPD, when they are triggered to emotional dysregulation, which happens internally, it's not anybody else's fault. It's from the past, and they become really insecure. They can become paranoid. They can read way too much into things, and sometimes, like I said, some people not only misinterpreting things in here now, but they could have a psychotic break if the dissociation goes to that severity. Um, so people with BP often, misperceive things for sure. They misascribe the intentions of partners all the time, and not purposefully, right? But still, it's devastating to people. It's often devastating to people with BPD too. But like I said earlier, I'll just repeat in case, is they might feel remorse right after. They might care. They might be so shamed they want to ghost you and leave, or they might not be aware at all. But the thing is, even with that awareness, then the next trigger, the next time, the emotions flood again, and they don't know what's going on, so they don't know how to stop it. And that's why therapy is so important. And if somebody is untreated and not willing to get therapy, then whether you're aware of it or not yet, you are in an impossible situation, and the relationship is unhealthy, to say the least, and it won't work out. And so, for people with BP and splitting, it feels like everyone abandons or hurts them, but that's a repetition compulsion from childhood, dissociatively in the here and now. So then they start looking for evidence in the here and now with you or the person that they're closest to create problems which ostensibly look like they're coming from nowhere and nothing. And in real time, in the here and now, they are. But in the person with BPD's experience, which is very real, dissociatively, as the past comes into the now, that's what they're responding to. So it's not about now, but it's very real to them. And it's really tragic that people that are untreated cannot catch up to what this is. Um, so they can't let go of the feelings unless they do something reckless to unleash them or to get away from anxiety or anger or fear and or all that in what they're feeling. So this is they'll split, and that sabotages relationships because it's very hurtful to other people. And actually, it's hurtful for the person with BPD too. But everybody with BPD isn't the same. So borderline splitting burns bridges more often than not in relationships when they act in ways to make or that affect a partner that you're essentially paying for and getting punished for what they're going through, though that isn't usually consciously on purpose either in highly triggered dysregulated. But it's not something that you can change or that really is healthy for you to be in the situation or to stay in the relationship. So people with BPD can get really spiteful when they feel hurt or mistreated, which is often not what's happening in the here and now. So then they can break up sometimes. They don't always split to devaluation and then break up and ghost, but that can happen sometimes. I mean, it happens a lot of times, not all the time. And then they forget the positive things about their partner until the partner's gone. But then in that abandonment phase, and even if they're moving on to monkey branching and all this other stuff, they're gonna, most of them, sooner or later, gonna think something about, wait a minute, because they might start to remember the good in the absence of you. So relationships fall apart as splitting causes a borderline to say things in the heat of those moments that they often regret afterwards, but that really, really hurt and devastate other people, to put it mildly. And the feelings when people with BPD are triggered that are their dissociative, the feelings from their past coming dissociatively into the here and now are absolutely disproportionate for every here and now moment. But they're not disproportionate to what the borderline went through in the arrested emotional development, lack of attachment, and the abandonment wound. So, but in the here and now, yeah, none of that belongs in the here and now. And if people with BPD would just go get treatment and stick with it, that can all change. But if you're with somebody with BPD right now, untreated, not getting treatment, doesn't want treatment, treatment takes years, and so you have to divest yourself. And that's where the dilemma comes in for people with codependency. So people with BPD, when they're splitting, they are in this dissociative state, like I said. Past is repeating in the here and now. Really has nothing to do with you. You're going to get blamed for it all. and have it, all projected out onto you. But because they have to, they're disowning their feelings to survive, because untreated, they don't have a clue what's happening to them. So I think most of that is probably pretty obvious to people, or people that have been through it. But maybe some new people, unfortunately, new people are finding those of us that talk about this every day. And I'm always getting new clients, and so people are just realizing this. So it bears more explanation, I think, even though many people may already understand this. Um, and people with BPD will be so convincing and splitting that you're the problem. And if you go to couples counseling, which I highly say don't do, don't recommend, because often people with BPD will persuade therapists that aren't experts in this area that the partner's to blame, and the whole thing blows up, because it'll blow up one way or the other, because I've tried to work with some couples when somebody with BPD's had at least 3 to 5 years worth of treatment, and it still often doesn't go very well. So because you can see I can see what's going on, and then when it comes back to the person with BPD, it's very hard to give them that feedback often. And even if they can start to take it in, then they have more work in therapy to do, and they don't usually want to hear that. So many people with BPD thinking that a year or two of DBT, let alone a year or two of DBT plus 2 or 3 years of in more recovery sort of targeted um, modalities of treatment, they think they're done, and then when they present in a couple, even if they've been treated for 2 or 3 years, when I have to suggest to them that there's a little more work to do, that they've done a really good job so far, but there's a little more work to do, because I see what the partner is presenting, it just becomes impossible. So this is a dilemma for people with codependency. Why people with codependency need to realize that BPD splitting is going to destroy relationships, whether you stay or not, whether they ghost you or not, because they have no trust, no ability to trust, no self to trust from, and they don't take in your love. So they don't take in your love. They don't know how to deal with kindness. They don't feel deserving. They have a huge shame wound. And with all of that, they don't attach to you. They haven't loved you. They won't love you. They can't love you. It would take significant treatment. When people with BPD go get that significant treatment over years, healing is very possible. Um, oh, thank you for that, Cargirl. Yes, I think I realize I am live now, and it is back, and it has resumed the same stream. I have never done that before, so I'm like, duh. Technically, I don't understand that, well, good. You know what I mean? And Alpha Dog said, I tried therapy, was told I'm schizoid personality disorder, and that I split. My mom told me she started slapping me when I was 1, so I can see how I developed splitting. I'd really like to know how to stop. Well, it's a little bit confusing, because in schizoid or schizoid, or however people like to say that, personality disorder, um, what you're describing, yeah, could well fit with that, but the degree to which you're describing it sounds very much like BPD. I'm not trying to say you have BPD, but I wonder why spending 2 years in therapy didn't really help. Like, do you have any awareness of what happens as you split, or like, do you know if you're being triggered, and then what happens when like right before you split, if you're aware of that? That might be helpful to know, because really can't help you that much here. Well, I'm sorry to hear you spent that much on a session, but it's important to work with people who really know what they're doing in this area. Of course, there are many, many clinicians out there. I'm just one here. But there's ways to learn. Now, I'm not an expert in schizoid personality or schizoid, whichever pronunciation is really the correct one. I don't know. But people have to, a therapist should explore with you, like, what's happening before, what are you aware of, that you might feel, and instantly before you split or get triggered. So sorry, I won't be able to be much more helpful on that because people with BPD with splitting, I mean, they have to go to long-term treatment, and the way it begins is like, and DBT can help with this with the DBT skills. They start to learn ways. It's all about radical acceptance and realizing what is, and it's a gateway to change. But first it's like, okay, let's be mindful, let's be aware of what's happening, what are we feeling, breaking it all down, because the first big hurdle is how to have people pause between what they're feeling and the action they take on it, because this is just the beginning of how people can really change this. But it does take considerable time, and it's not the same for everybody with BPD. Because everybody with BPD isn't the same. And may I reiterate, I don't know if I said it in the first part, because don't remember that anymore with the technical difficulty. Borderline personality disorder, though the APA, the pseudoscience, and the hegemony big pharma might still be trying to search for, it's heritable. Oh, it's in the genetics. Oh, but no, there's much more pioneering work going on. And I'm speaking to some practitioners who are pioneering that work, and I'm learning even more from them, although I'm aware of this, that it's BPD is not inherited. BPD is not a brain disease. BPD is not the medical reality that the pseudoscience of the APA with a hegemony of big pharma is trying to make it. Because, of course, they have a biased agenda to want to get people on medication. And why would you need medication when it's not physical? So, when I say that, I need to also add that yes, trauma affects the brain and it can change the brain, especially of an infant to a toddler, but of an adult as well. But here's the thing, within these recovery modalities, what happens is neuroplasticity. And one of the best books on, or one of the first earliest best books on this was The Brain Changes Itself by Dr. Norman Deutsch. And so I can't think of others right now, but these are the books, these are the doctors, these are the psychiatrists, these are the pioneering professionals from where I get my information. So it's not like I just floated out there for the heck of it, which I think most people know. But Darius, hey there, you said I think some of them are novelty seekers and they're creating problems to split. No, actually not at all. There's nothing novel or purposeful about splitting. Because trust me, if people with BP untreated could figure out what they're doing and why, they'd stop it in a heartbeat if it was that simple. Hey there, Billy the Goat. Hope you're doing well. Um, oh yeah, well, welcome. Is that Benzaya? Sorry, I'm going to not be able to say that correctly, probably. You said, I find if I have a third person present, it is like a buffer. The BPD person acts in their best behavior. Well, that can happen, but if they get triggered strongly enough, again, everybody with BPD is different. So somebody else with BPD with a third party, it wouldn't with 30 other people there wouldn't change anything. And some people with BPD might be a little bit more able to do something about it. But again, they're responsible for this, right? I'm not trying to say they're not. But unless they get treatment and figure out what to do and what's really happening and understand it, they're not going to be able to change it. And Billy the Goat, it's like knowingly obvious but compelled. But it's not knowingly obvious to untreated people with BPD. Yeah, so it's not even known on a deep level inside of people with BPD unless they get treatment. It just isn't. Um, and Alpha Dog, yep, I got trapped in my head, and then I'm irritable. Like, why did my mom abuse me? She said she abused me, so it's not like I'm making it up. Well, right. But the question isn't really why did your mother do that, sorry. The question is what do you need to do to be able to heal and recover from that? And then you may or may not find out ever the why. And in any recovery and healing process for people with codependency, in your own healing recovery journey, or if you're still with somebody with BPD or whatever other issues somebody could have, the point is, the question why is the last question that if you do get an answer to it at some point, it's going to be the last thing you figure out or the last thing that you learn. Like when I'm working with clients, I answer a plethora of questions often about cluster B, about people with BPD, about why they do this, why they say that, why this happened, then I did this, then they did that, blah blah, and all that. And the thing is, so people I work with, I try to help with the codependency and try to do sort of a simultaneous process at times. But the thing is, the why question keeps people stuck because what you have to do is first look at what's happening. And then if you recognize your own codependency, what's happening is not healthy. And what's happening means you need to go. What's happening means you need to take care of yourself. So the why is a question that keeps people stuck. And of course, it's not like just because you need to go or you might know you need to go. Not like, excuse me, not like that's simple or, oh yeah, I need to go, so I'll just go. But something that people really need to think more about. Roller Girl, his splitting happens, then I'm depressed. Then he looks at me like I'm crazy. I vocalize how he could be more caring and loving. He walks away and calls his ex for support. Well, he's not getting it, is he? And what you're doing is allowing somebody else's mood state, as codependents do, to affect yours. So really, if you're going to continue in this relationship, which it seems you are, and that's your choice, then one thing you might really benefit from learning is when he's splitting and whatever he's doing, you need to find a way to maintain enough emotional detachment to not have your mood go to get depressed over whatever he's doing or not doing. And when you vocalize how he could be more caring and loving, and I believe if I remember correctly, you're with a narcissist, it's like okay, pissing into the wind. I can't think of anything more futile. So you continue to, it must be codependent denial. I mean, with all due respect, you continue to try to vocalize how he could be more loving and caring. Well, he's a narcissist. And then when he goes and calls his ex for support, no, he probably goes and calls his ex for supply to the narc injury that he's getting from you, which, hey, you're not doing it, but that he's experiencing from you. But it's his thing. Oh, Billy Goat, you meant oblivious, not obvious. Oh, that's cool. Alpha Dog. Oh, yeah. Well, you're saying sorry to Roller Girl, but yet this is Roller Girl's choice. So I don't mean to sound devoid of empathy. I have compassion. But the point is, when people keep choosing the same things over and over, getting the same result, getting hurt the same way, then I don't know. Empathy, I have compassion. I'm not judging. But empathy is hard to extend because people need to make choices that they refuse to make, and only they can make them. Darius, medication could help when a person with BPD is suicidal or something like that. No, not really. Not at all. For the moment, ad hoc. Usually, not really. However, meds for a long time is not that great idea. Well, let me just quote again. It was a British source, but it's not like it isn't common knowledge outside of the pseudoscience of American psychiatry, which people need to stop being inculcated and influenced by, not because I say so. Do the research because they don't know. They talk about a lot of stuff they haven't proven. So, what the quote is to this is, quote, psychiatric medication is counterindicated in the treatment of borderline personality, unquote. And I saw that from a UK treatment center, but doesn't matter where it comes from. It's just common knowledge. Apparently not for American psychiatry, but for every other clinician on earth. John Smith, hey there. My BPDX devalued me and discarded me. You could tell She was emotionally dysregulated and was on a power trip when she broke up with me. She's now in a rebound. How long before the BPD screws the new guy? Well, and when you say she's on a power trip, I hear you. And I know what that must have been like for you. And I'm sorry that that happened. But her quote, power trip, unquote, is overcompensatory defense. But still, it is how it is experienced, right? Um, Hard to say how long before she screws the next guy, as in, are you talking about the monkey branching aspect of physical intimacy? Or are you talking about that and then when the whole relationship deteriorates and she walks away from that person too? Because not everybody with BPD has this ghosting pattern, but the ones who do, whether whatever the person's pattern is with BPD, they will hold to the pattern because it's their cycle, and they don't know what's going on. Yeah, interesting comment. I'm just gonna call you Elena, okay, because I can't say the first name. I work with a BPD person. This person is wanting to change and knows they are toxic, also known as reactive, and wants to be healthy. I don't allow person to be passive aggressive with me. Well, that's good. I don't know what capacity you're working with them, but yeah. But when I work with people with BPD, I don't disallow them to be where they are because within reason, they have to learn before they can change. Um, Billy the goat, they know something isn't right, but because they can't figure it out, they shrug and accept it as a way to be, condemning themselves. Yeah, that's a shame wound, and that's the reality of the amount of pain that they really have hanging outside of self that they've never internalized. Because if they internalized it, they never would have survived it. But that's what the process of therapy is about: is helping people to internalize that pain that they're always externalizing onto everybody else. Um, well, Roller Girl, I hope you know I'm not trying to be, judgmental or, hard ass, but keeping it real to help people heal, that's the thing. But they're your choices. It's just if you're going to make those self defeating choices within the choice to stay in the relationship, you might want to consider potentially helping yourself out a little bit more, since you've chosen to stay in the relationship. Alpha Dog, for me, I ruminate on the past and that impacts my current mood. I also have been told I have PTSD. Well, I don't know, 'cause, no offense, but you seem to be being told, and I believe you, that you have a lot of different things. And some of them could be said, PTSD and schizoid personality. I'm not sure that they flow together so well. You might really benefit from maybe a psychologist could assess you, because psychiatrists, I don't know, but it's up to people. But you would benefit from one overall assessment because one of the things going on today is that too many people are getting diagnosed with too many things that don't even make sense, largely, often. And then there's the value of the second opinion, but it sounds like you've had maybe too many opinions. Um, so do you really know what's going on for you if you're getting different diagnoses? And I don't know if it's by the same professional or not, So sometimes this is really not going to help people out. And then you said, actually, my mom said she slapped me because, quote, that's how she was raised, unquote. Oh, yeah, well, they always say that. I just don't get it. I never had kids, so I don't repeat the cycle. Well, yeah, and I mean, it depends what the slapping means and where she slapped you, as opposed to if she, spanked you, but even that, is seen as rather archaic. Hey there, Tim. When I caught her cheating, it was my fault. I was all bad. Nothing good about me, never loved me. It was all bad. I wondered if we even breathed the same air or why we ever got together. Splitting. Well, yes. And it is because of what the people with BPD fall into internally that they experience as being external from the past. And then when the splitting occurs, yes, all the good goes away in an evaluation split because they're in all the bad. So all I'm really trying to explain here, and it may be helpful, and it may not matter to people, and not everybody's the same, is that people with BPD really don't understand what they're doing, because ask yourself that, but it doesn't change how people are, getting hurt and traumatized by them at all. And they're responsible to go get the therapy they need for change, just as are codependents, right? Because if you stay with somebody who's a narcissist or a borderline and you're a codependent, and then you don't like the outcome or the way they treat you, well, you're in control of that more than they are. So then people with codependency and denial, etc., they get into the collusion and the complicity, because people with BPD and NPD can't keep abusing you if you don't let them, once you understand what's going on. And yet it's still a dilemma for codependents, because codependency has within it a false self, has within it woundedness from childhood to varying degrees. For some people, it is exponentially very close to BPD. And for some people with codependency, it is not that close. But there's an overlapping similarity that doesn't mean sameness. So, and like Tim said, like it is so sad and tragic for everybody, but people on the other side getting so hurt because when they split, which they're responsible to go get treatment to learn how to stop doing, they don't have any idea. They lose all the good. They really do. It's out of sight, out of mind. And then Timmy said, yep, just like if someone dumped a pile of crap in your living room. It's not your fault, but you still have to clean it up. Very true. And in this case, when people with BPD, with the splitting and whether relationships continue, because it's not like the first time a person does with BPD the valuation split that they'll ghost you. Some are like that, but not all. Many relationships last a lot of years with this devaluation, and they might yell, scream, do whatever they do that's not irresponsible at all. But relationships continue, and they don't all ghost. But the point of that is, like you mentioned, that's a good way to put it, Tim. Like if somebody just dumped a pile of crap in your living room, it's not your fault, but you have to clean it up. But in this case, it's like people with codependency, people with their own woundedness already, that are avoiding their own pain and externalizing all that out, as they learn to do in childhood with a parent, onto the borderline or the narcissist. Well, then it's like, yeah, they're dumping the crap and you have to clean it up, but it's also rewounding, and in some cases traumatizing and re-traumatizing people. So, and then what happens when people with codependency can't find their way out, or even when the borderline ghosts, they have to keep pursuing. That's what people really need to get more on top of and focus on and think about, because there's going to be no easy way out of this for people, as many people already know. Darius, in my case, everything was my fault too. But a few months later, everything changed. She said a few weeks ago, quote, it was my fault too. I was reading it and it disappeared. But anyway, when they come back later and say it was their fault too, first of all, it may have been entirely their responsibility. Oh, wait a minute, there it is. It was my fault too, but a few months later, everything changed, and she said a few weeks ago, quote, it was my fault too. You weren't that bad. I don't know why I said these things. Well, clearly that's somebody who feels bad about, the way they behaved, but without the understanding of how they behaved or how they impacted you, or and if you were to interesting yourself in contact, because that's another thing people really need to think about themselves more. But if you were to engage with her again or more, like, get back with her, it's going to happen all over again. She hasn't had enough time to have enough treatment. And so even though she's seeing it, some people with BPD are quite aware there's a problem. They don't understand it, and they'll talk about it, and then they have incongruent and sometimes fleeting awareness, but they can't stop it next time it happens, because if they could, they would, but that's what they need treatment for. So when they say those kind of things, they can maybe have some awareness, but they don't have the understanding and they don't have the ability to change it. Um, oh, Tim, yes, you couldn't have put that in a more. I mean, you said to Darius, but you said you hear Darius, and you said your wife will never forgive you for her cheating. I know. That's just the crazy making of it all, right? That she cheated, she externalizes that, she projects that out onto you, and untreated, she's never going to figure out what's, because oh, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that that's the case. And that is the case for so many people. And BPD splitting does destroy relationships. And when a person with BPD is splitting, it should like often in their cycles and not in treatment, it needs to destroy the relationship because people need to get out of there. And why don't people get out of there? Well, it's the codependent factor of like, quote, I don't want to face, not that people are thinking this consciously, might know now, might not know yet, but it's like, quote, the codependent says, I don't want to face my pain. I don't want to have to look at myself, and therefore, I'm going to stay in this nutty chaos here with this person with BPD, and I'll keep trying, or narcissist, and I'll keep trying to fix and change them. Doesn't work. Alpha Dog, you said laugh out loud. Jeez, that's incredible. Cause is it, you know, I wouldn't be laughing if I were you, but that's just me. You said I've had 4 or 5 diagnoses: schizoid, bipolar, PTSD, ADD, and autism spectrum, and OCD. Well, my God, what is going on in this world? And then you said, so who knows? All I know is I'm sensitive and certainly don't want to hurt other people. Yeah, but how are you going to be able to become your best you and find some peace, if not even happiness, with that smorgasbord of BS? Because somewhere in there or not in those labels is maybe what you actually are having difficulty with, but certainly not all of those, because that's just a mess, right? And in today's world, what I would say about that is that's psychiatry wanting you to be on a lot of medication. That doesn't make sense. I don't know you, but I'm just saying you need to go to one person who's really competent. I don't know who you would find and how you would know, but who would actually really assess you for all of these things. You should go somewhere and tell someone, listen, I've been diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder, bipolar, PTSD, ADD, on the autism spectrum, and OCD. So I want to be tested for all this stuff, and like, cause I think what you'll find is there's no way that's all true. Um, wow, I'm sorry that's happened for you because you really do need to try one more time somewhere to get all of that ruled out and or let the one thing or the aspect of what's really what you're dealing with rise to the top with exhaustive testing of all of those labels because they can't all fit. It's no, it's just crazy. Darius, I don't. For me, it's over. Well, that's good. For you, I blocked her on Facebook, but there's the many ways to be in touch with me online. I just said to her, "Go to therapy. I don't want to be in this mess anymore." Well, good for you. And as long as if you can't block her everywhere, and there's ways she's still getting in touch with you, as long as that's not affecting you, and but you might want to think about just not responding anymore because that would truly set you free. Because obviously, saying go to therapy is lovely, but like they don't listen unless they realize for themselves, they won't be going anywhere. Hey there, Heather. My ex explained his behavior is like a volcano erupting, and the lava burned everyone around him. We got married, bought a beautiful home, we both have kids, and he destroyed it all. Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. It's more than incredibly sad. And the fact that he could explain his behaviors like a volcano erupting, well, yeah. And that's worth the price of coffee or relationship or heartbreak. That means what exactly, right? Because I don't know. Some people with BPD think when they're expressing things like that, it matters. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything, unfortunately. Well, and sometimes people with BPD, to your comment, Tim, might think that they're the center of the universe, but it's for a very different reason than narcissists. And it doesn't come from the same place as narcissists, or specifically the overt narcissist. So, but here's the thing I really want to get to, right? So, splitting is at the core of relationship impossibility with people with BPD. Not everybody knows that yet because there's people just discovering this now. But people have been watching videos, and you're on, and you know better now. And many people have left relationships and are working on their own healing and recovery. But for people with codependency, why I'm talking about BPD splitting again, because there's lots of information out there about it. You probably experienced it. You probably have a pretty good idea about it. You might not know the real down deep explanation of what's really going on, but like you might not care either because it's very painful, and then some. But the point I'm trying to make here is, in the face of the fact that somebody's untreated with BPD and they're going to split to devalue, and they're not going to ever get back to the original idealization honeymoon phase, and they're not really that person, and you know all this now, then why are so many people with codependency still in pursuit, even after being ghosted, in the on-off cycles? People with codependency have to ask themselves, not really why, because why isn't the best question, but like, I hurt so much, I want to stay away from the why. People with codependency really need to get with their own pain and get into their own healing and recovery journey and not think. Because, see, people with codependency are projecting out that everything about the borderline or the narcissist is why you hurt so bad. But that's not entirely the whole reality of a situation. That might be why you have a lot of pain that you need to heal, and they've caused you more pain. But you went into people go into with codependency these trauma bonded relationships with borderlines and narcissists with already pain, and you're replicating it in the relationship with the cluster B, but it's not consciously known. But the second it is, why don't people with codependency take action for themselves to stop abandoning themselves? And I shouldn't say why, because I'm trying to stay away from the why. But that's what people with codependency need to focus on and look at. And oh, you betcha it's going to hurt. It's going to be so painful, unfortunately. But the only way out is through the pain. And you can't rescue a BPD, but you can change, and you can help yourself and get help for yourself. Um, Heather, it's so hard to wrap your head around what they do to you. Well, yes, and more to the point, why they do it, right? It's the why trap again, but also the lack of closure and the cognitive dissonance and the love addiction and the maybe relationship addiction. And it's not the same for every single person with codependency, but trying to wrap your head around what they do to you is still focusing on them instead of you. And people need to focus on themselves. And like I said, when I work with clients, there's a simultaneous aspect to the duality of this. But people can't just be trying to wrap their head around what the cluster B did, or you're not wrapping your head around where you need to travel next. What's going on for you? So, because as much as people with BPD have a lot of responsibility for what they do and how they hurt people, so do codependents have responsibility for what you're doing there. That's just reality. And I don't mean to make that sound uncaring or anything. Tim, volcano erupting lava all over. Everyone around put an image in my mind. Yeah, but a lot of people with codependency are volunteering, whether knowingly or not, to stand right beside the volcano and get engulfed with lava and still not think that there's an urgent need for their own recovery and healing. Darius, there's always some effect, but what can I do? It's almost a year after breakup, and I'm finding a lot more in my work, learning from this mistake, doing new things, and healing your own problems. Well, I don't know. Keep trying to block her because I think for every app that there is in social media, I don't use them all, I don't know. But I would think for every app that you can connect with somebody, you can also block and disconnect. Might be a lot of work if you use a lot of apps, but it might be worth it. And then of course if they make up a fake account or whatever, I know it could be endless. Um, and Darius said, and yes, she said about therapy, quote, borderline question mark. No, there is something wrong with me, but it isn't borderline. Well, yeah, and not everybody that people thinks have BPD. I mean, probably most people are right, but again, there's more understanding happening. But the bottom line is, yeah, I've heard from so many clients that, the person with BPD in their life untreated, or that was in their life, or they had a relationship with in different relationship types, will accept other labels, but not BPD. I have clients that come to me with saying they have CPTSD, and I guess we're going to see what's pioneered here in the near future, with pioneering replicated studies happening around the world, but not in America, with the pseudoscience of the American Psychiatric Association. See, I know so much more right now than I'm even at liberty to say, and I'm still learning about something, wherein many clinicians are pioneering unbelievable things about what this really is, what BPD really is, more to the point, how to treat it. The treatment is there. The healing and recovery is so possible. But if people won't get on the train, they can't take the journey. And of course, nobody can make them take the journey. So, but when I have a client come to me and it looks like what's classically known as BPD and they say they have CPTSD, I mean, it's different in relationships, right? But I couldn't care less. I'm like, okay, we'll work with that label. Let's just get the work done. Let's just get into the healing recovery process here for this person. I really don't care about labels. Because at the end of the day, I'm still a firm believer, and there's literature out there to support, well, not literature, facts out there to support this. Mental illness is a false construct, and the pseudoscience of American psychiatry is still trying to forward it like this is all inherited, genetic, and in the brain. And it is BS, ladies and gentlemen. So, and that's not, I don't have a need to say that. I don't have skin in the game. I don't have BPD anymore if I ever had it in the first place. And I will have some explanations around that coming. But I went through a boatload of trauma, and I had the lens because I was labeled and never diagnosed correctly with BPD. I certainly had the lens of that experience. So there's no denying that. Darius, I'm a journalist online. There is no way. Um, well, I work online too, and I have need to block lots of people online, and I have need to sometimes, I hate to say it, but the odd former client, ones that I will terminate service with. I have to do what I do, and then yeah, I have a contact email. Well, sometimes just the odd person feels like telling me off there, and or people I'm familiar with. um, I don't answer. It just goes straight to delete, and then their address will go to what do you call it? The spam folder or whatever. And I don't go to spam folders looking for stuff. So it depends, Darius, if you want to stay in what can I do about it, or if you really want to be proactive and do the best you can to make it next to impossible for her. Which might not make it totally impossible. Like I said, I still get crazy emails sometimes from people out there in YouTube land, but I don't engage them. And most of them, if they repeat, they go to spam folders, and they often don't repeat because I just delete, don't care, and don't reply. So not replying is pretty key. If you can't stop all the contact or avenues of contact, then it's really important to not engage by saying go to therapy, because that's really not going to help anybody. Thank you for that, Nancy. So, the message really about borderline splitting being at the core of relationship impossibility is yeah, okay. And they can be treated and they can heal and they can recover. Oh, yes, they can. But if they're not going to choose it and they're not doing it, then this really turns around the other way on the codependent to say, so what are you going to do? So what are you going to do to help yourself out? So what are you going to, and lots of people have got out of relationships and healed and gone forward. But to people that might listen to this later who are still going through this, and I guess there's been a few people on the stream that are, in their own ways and whatnot, you have to, look in the mirror. You have to look at self. I mean, you don't have to, but it would really behoove you to. You would really find that through your own healing and recovery journey, which goes back to childhood. It's not all about the cluster B. It's about both at this point in people's lives. But I guess what I feel passionate about right now is the message about codependency. Is the message that no matter what the borderline does, whether they're quiet BPD, whether they're classic acting out, petulant, whatever the other subtype is, whether this, that, or the other thing that the APA says, like they can't prove anything scientifically. There's so much more explanation to all this. But is that what codependents need? More explanation to this? Or do you need to actually just start making changes in your own life? So I'm passionate about that right now. So, and I work with clients, I have for 30 years, but I work with a lot of clients that really want to do the work or say they really want to do the work, but change is really difficult. So some get into that more quickly and start embracing a process. And others, it's like, lots of defenses and lots of different things. And that's fine. I meet clients wherever they are, no judgment. But the point is, this is really, I want people to hear this again. And I've said it in other videos recently. I'm going to say it more. Codependency is its own trauma response. It is serious business. It is painful. And it is practically almost as painful as BPD. Now, there's a difference there, but people, I think, take codependency too lightly. And the denial in codependency is humongous. So that's my message on the other side of this message, is people with codependency really need to stop this. Why did the borderline do this? Why did they do that? They broke up, they ghosted, they did this, are they going to do this, are they going to do that? Because, man, in all of that, you don't exist. And people are always saying, well, a person with BPD doesn't see me, they don't hear me, which is understandable because they don't most of the time or often. But then you're not seeing you or hearing you either. So that must like really make that wound 10 times worse than the cluster B has the power to. So I'm trying to empower people with codependency here. And yes, even people that are in family relationships, if you're the parent, which is the hardest, I think, in the 13 to 25% of good moms, and dads, and you have an adult child with BPD, well, you have to disengage and detach with love, and you have to find a way to go on in your own life because you can't rescue and change them and fix them. And lots of parents of adult children with BPD aren't seeing their grandchildren. There's all this punishment and stuff going on, and it's horrible. And the other thing is, if you have a sibling with BPD, no matter what age you are in life, it probably isn't going to work out. How many times are you going to be the codependent rescuer after they just, sliced and diced you on the altar of like, but you're to blame for everything that I feel, blah, 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 blah. And then, but this is how entrenched in people's lives codependency is because it's such a young childhood woundedness in its own right. Erebus, if I'm saying that anywhere correctly. One day into no contact, one day, wow, God bless you, and 1 minute at a time. One day into no contact after a year-long relationship, by far the hardest part was second-guessing myself and making excuses for their behavior. The battle against my own mind was never ending. I'm so sorry to hear that because, there's something likely from your past also that it's not just about the cluster B, but the cluster B, the person with BPD, the X doesn't, there's all that damage and woundedness that layers on top of something else. That is why people have so much self-doubt. as well as, how you've been treated by that person. So take it 1 minute at a time to begin with. You're on your first day, 1 minute at a time until you can take it 5 minutes, 10 minutes at a time, then 20 minutes, but one day at a time for sure. And I hope that you get into your own healing and recovery journey as well. And I have another video. I think if I have time to do it later today, I might do it. I've been meaning to do it, keep forgetting what it is. But it kind of goes to partially how people with codependency keep their own denial going, and what is the mechanism of that, and what is the remedy for that. But it, even though I can put that in an articulated video, it's again still requires changing action on the part of people with codependency, because you can't heal, recover, or make steps toward that process without doing making painful, difficult choices to start with. And that can be really triply hard, not only because of the pain, the cognitive dissonance, the love addiction, the chemical soup aspect of it all, the withdrawal, the all of everything else that goes with that. And that makes it feel impossible. But yeah, so people get kind of stuck on, it's kind of like a hamster wheel, right? You want to get off it, it hurts really bad, but how to get out of this relationship, because it's like the hamster wheel. And you're on the darn thing, and it's squeaking, and it's maybe half falling apart, and then it's on off again, or even if they're gone. And but see, why do codependents pursue the person with BPD or the narcissist after the person with BPD goes, so the narcissist discards? Because you're not just pursuing that person, it's not just a here and now thing, it's something going on in your inner child. The inner child ego state, so powerful, so working at such a depth of an unconscious level, in all what's going on for you in your conscious awareness even. So like I've said so many times, when people are attracted to certain other people, there's the here and now adult attraction, yes, and everything like that, but there's also a transaction, meaning that in a transactional analysis speak way, there's a transaction going on between inner child the inner child ego state in each people that are coming together, like the codependent, the narcissist, codependent, the borderline. Not that that people with BPD or the narcissist know that part of self at all, or that part of ego state. And codependents are somewhat separated from it too, with a false self in a different way. But the bottom line is transacting under everything, no matter what it is, with the false self in codependency and BPD, NPD in different ways, is that aspect of, or lost aspect of, child ego state that's on a whole different plane than you are, in your unconscious, affecting your choices, drawing you to what you already know is familiar, maybe not consciously, but your child ego state knows its familiarity. So it's really deep, difficult, painful stuff. Well, you know what, Tim? I've often thought, and people have said they should teach this in school, but you know why they don't teach it in school? I think a lot of things are out in broad day of sunlight right now, or sunlight of day. TV, when TV came along, TV programming, TV guide, inculcation of mind. When we go to school, didn't know it then, but when kids go to school today, if they even can, because the world has gone nuts, and probably in a planned kind of way, one way or the other. But the point is, or something, that there's, I don't know how to put it, but there are cluster B powers, right? So in the narcopath, the dark triad, and beyond, controlling certain aspects of things. I'm not saying maybe everything, but for time immemorial, children grew up generation after generation, even way back centuries before, but in the last 100 years or 200, whatever, going to school to be inculcated to what we're supposed to believe and how we're supposed to behave and what benefits society, not the individual, not individual freedom, not our personhood, not our beingness. And so they will never teach this stuff in school. Took me a long time to figure that out, but I figured that out a while ago. It's a sad statement to make, too. Darius said we talked about that, and I pointed her 8 or 9 traits from DSM-5. Yeah, well, that's about as reliable as a bowl of Jello, but I hear you. She only is not explosive. It was just friendly advice. Now I'm more interested in this topic than in her. Well, that's probably positive. Um, just know for those people that are always looking at the DSM-5 and the Pseudoscience of American Psychiatry and a really well constructed book. Hey, for those people that aren't Christian or don't think much of any religion, you might think the Christian Bible to be a total confabulation of nonsense. Well, then, equally so is the DSM, let me tell you, the quote Bible of the American Psychiatric Association. I hope soon I'm going to be able to, probably on my website, get some information up. Lots of other pioneering and well known famous people, unlike myself, is where I get this information from. And of course, some of it comes by way of my lived experience, sure, but that's not what forms my overall opinion. So, but I'm not saying you're not correct, Darius, but the point is, when people are still looking to the pseudoscience of the APA with the hegemony of big pharma, um, not that you need to now, but people with BPD would be best served too, and anybody who still cares about somebody with BPD would be best to look at the ICD-11 and look at psychiatry around the world. Canada's kind of subsumed by America, but around the world there are pioneering studies going on that matter way more than APA studies. Why? Because they're not, everything in America is big and everything in America is privatized for profit that shouldn't be, in my humble opinion, that isn't around the rest of the world or many areas of the rest of the world. And so they're actually replicating their studies. Now we start to see evidence. And guess what? Their findings aren't the same as the APA, who doesn't do scientific methodology based studies without the bias and the money with a hegemony of big pharma. So start looking around the rest of the world. Start looking for information because that's what I've been doing for a long time. And then there are a lot of psychiatrists and clinicians in North America who know how BS this DSM stuff is. But many psychiatrists won't come out and say it publicly. But I can't tell you how many I've talked to privately that will say it. And I mean, it's not thousands, but it's probably like over 100. And it's probably way more out there. But they have peer pressure in their profession because it's a profession that is being driven by madness. And I say that because, as Dr. Niall McLaren said to me in an interview in 2011, himself a psychiatrist, that the profession was driving itself off a cliff. And I'm still waiting for it to go over the cliff because they're not helping people. The real help to people, whether it's BPD, some people with NPD can be helped if they choose to be. And so there's no monolithic all them, everybody's the same, codependency, BPD, NPD, other things. So anyway, I know I probably am repeating myself a lot, but this is accurate information. And it's not because I'm saying it. It doesn't come from me. I didn't think it up, make it up, or invent it. Darius. Oh, yeah, psychology. Oh, what did Tim say? Oh, okay. And then, you said psychology. There is math, biology, but psychology in Poland is only in some high schools. For me, it's more important than religion lessons or something like that. Yeah, well, and you know what? There are people who have BPD and NPD and malignant narcissism and psychopathy and dark triads that have the education in psychology, or some of them may be psychiatrists, dare I say. So there are clinicians out there with BPD, with NPD, with psychopathy. And so what do they really learn when they take the education? Not a whole lot, really, but they're out there and they're going to hurt people. John, what did you mean before when you said my BPDX was overcompensating when I experienced a discard as a power trip or an increase in the control dynamics? Well, I mean, they are pulling for more control because they feel more out of control. but it's overcompensating in the sense that it's defensive. It doesn't mean that they have more power. It doesn't mean that you need to feel disempowered by their power play, because it's still defense mechanisms at work. So they're overcompensating for feeling absolutely out of control. People with BPD are so disempowered, it is tragic. So people who get hurt by people with BPD give them so much power because they've hurt you, but they don't really have any power, if that makes sense. So, and it is overcompensating defense when they up the ante and they get into the control dynamics, as so are codependents into the control dynamics in their own way. But the power trip of discard, if she isn't comorbid with NPD, but even so, the power trip of discard comes out of vapid insecurity, just rampant insecurity, and they feel so out of control that it's the defense mechanism overcompensating to pull for control. And then at that point, sometimes with some with BPD, many with NPD, they will be out to punish the living daylights out of you, but they're not all the same. Tim, I used to be suspicious of her constant need for attention from other men. Yes, that would be suspicion rousing for sure. She convinced me I was jealous possessive. Sorry to hear that, because those were your instincts working. And you let her get away with it for 7 out of 22 years. Well, yeah, it is kind of a form of gaslighting, though in BPD it's not really known as such, but yeah, I would agree. I mean, it amounts to the same thing, but it was just abject lying, and of course, the ever popular term of monkey branching and what that's all about. And the reality that people who don't know themselves, and this includes some people with codependency, but I'm going to have a video coming on that in the near future. But people with BPD, they don't have the self, etc. I can't say that enough because it's so key. Not that you have to care about that, but when they don't have any self, then they're feeling out of control, and their behavior is going to be out of control. And all this stuff that they're doing is how they responded to the threats in their childhood. And so it's all repetition compulsions. And then people with codependency have their own repetition compulsions unless they get into recovery, healing, and work through those as well. And you said my ex has BPD plus, I guess, bipolar, I think you mean. She gave me depression and anxiety. 3 years now, I'm still on medication. I'm having an anxiety attack at the moment. I'm so sorry to hear that. Deep breathe. Slow, deep breaths. Um, Put your feet on the floor and make sure your eyes are wide open. Ground yourself if you've been taught how to do that. But if not, start practicing now. And you said you can't fix them. Just focus on you and move on. It's very true. And I'm really sorry to hear that. I mean, in a way, I hear what you're saying by she gave you the depression and anxiety. She definitely affected you in really negatively impacting and wounding ways. And I'm really sorry to hear that. And just know, hopefully, you can be on that medication short term, because there are ways. I hope you are working with somebody or will, because there are ways to learn how to deal with those feelings and why you have those feelings and the situation from which they came without medication. But in the beginning, sometimes people, for a short term, that can be helpful, but you don't want to end up stuck on that stuff. So there are ways to learn, and anxiety attacks are so scary. But all the symptoms that you have when you're having an anxiety attack is the reality that the CO2 and oxygen balance in your system is out of whack. It creates all those symptoms. And I'm really sorry to hear that you're going through that. But I hope that you do have some management techniques and tools for the anxiety attacks. And if you don't, please work with somebody to learn some. Um, and John to Tim, they accuse you of that which they are doing. Yes, often it is straight projection. Yes. Um, and of course, people with codependency have their own projections back, but it's not the same thing. Heather, I'm working on codependency, love addiction, and the issues from my childhood with a therapist. With that being said, it's still difficult because I was in love with who I thought he was. Fairy tale. Yes. And maybe, I don't want to lay too much on people that they might not want to hear right now. But what you will come to realize through your own healing and recovery journey and about how you loved a fairy tale, how you fell in love with somebody that presented the way they did, you will find that out in your own healing and recovery process because it's not like I'm not trying to blame you for it or anything, but it comes from childhood woundedness because and that is also the aspect that's one big part of it, central part. The other part is from the childhood woundedness, then people with codependency don't have the boundaries that they need to have, right? So, but it's good that you're that aware, that you were in love with who that you thought he was, and it was a fairy tale, and that's really painful. But your awareness and working in your own healing recovery is really going to help you to understand that and help you to also heal it. Um, and Tim said to Heather that disillusionment was the worst part of it for me, finding out I was in love with a fantasy. Well, yeah, and I understand when people say it that way, but you have to realize then that if you were in love with a fantasy, what was happening with your love? Like, I don't mean to question people. I'm just saying, for people with codependency, um, the love that you're giving and sometimes overextending has other components to it. Um, John, I'm sorry. I heard for years. Okay, because I couldn't figure out the I. There, you type. So all you heard for years was, "Don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me." Then she leaves me. You're always busy, always busy, always busy. Okay, I give her more attention. Stop smothering me crazy. Well, that sounds like, I hate you, don't leave me, get away closer, push, pull. It's the approach avoidance conflict that she needed, didn't want you to leave, didn't want you to leave, needed more attention, more attention, more attention, not for the same reason narcissists need it, but needed that. And then, so, saying you're too busy, you're always busy, you give her more attention, and then she goes from abandonment fear to engulfment, and then that's the push. So the push pull, the I hate you, don't leave me, to get away closer, like all these cycles, like I did a video, all these cycles are leading to people getting closer and closer apart. And it does seem crazy. I can actually explain it, but it doesn't matter because people don't really kind of always want to know the ins and outs of why it happens for people with BPD. Stephanie, AJ, I was with my boyfriend who I believe is borderline, no official diagnosis. Broke up with me after 5 years through email. So sorry to hear that. He also was transgender. Do you think there is a link between being transgender and BP diagnosis? Well, boy, that's one of those $64 million questions or something. Um, for some people there can be, but I would say it's not necessarily for all. It is um, a contentious subject area, and in which people are trying to, in professional capacities, work to more clarify that. So again, the pseudoscience of the APA has lots of theories out there that they call the truth, from their big pharma funded studies, that they would suggest, woohoo, in all the biology of the biology, that's nonsense, that this too is what that's about. But there is no evidence of that. But what I will say is, for some people, the gender dysmorphia, gender, maybe that's not the right word term there, but people with a BPD diagnosis can really be unsure of who they are, and it can go so far as to sexual orientation or gender. But I think there's other things at play there too, and or whatever borderline personality has been defined as is certainly morphing. Like, I keep saying that because even when I got labeled with it without a diagnosis, I have any of this stuff going on. So it's very different today. And I don't just measure that by myself. So the answer, unfortunately, Stephanie, is it may well have something to do with it, or it may not, because it's hard to say because not all people with BPD are the same, and not all people who are transgender would have BPD or would be transgender for exactly the same reasons. I think is the most responsible way to put it. Um, Darius, when you start looking at this deeply, look at hypochondria. I think it's overlooked symptom. Oh, I just don't have enough time to talk about everything, Darius. Hypochondria is in the mix. It absolutely is. But it doesn't change the reality of the trauma that people with BPD have been through, in more cases than not. But oh, yeah, neurosis, hypochondria is a big part of BPD for a lot of people with BPD. I will try to let me take a picture of that comment and maybe try to do a video on that too, because there's like 9 billion things still, even though I've been doing this for 30 years and however, almost that online. And of course, when YouTube got born and I reluctantly came over here, but not as long over here. But yeah, so I just wanted to validate for you that absolutely hypochondria, not for all, but for many with BPD, is totally in the mix. But it's not what's driving essentially what BPD is, but it's another issue for sure.